improving the awareness and knowledge of law enforcement officials on disability inclusion, training of law enforcement officials. Pusat Hak Asasi Manusia Universitas Islam Indonesia or PUSHAM UII or the Center for Human Rights Law, collaborating with the Disabled People Organization or DPO, Sasana Integrasi dan Advokasi Difabel or SIGAP, have designed a curriculum for training and resources on disability rights and equitable access by people with disability to courts, the judicial and legal processes and services. They have facilitated for the first time in Indonesia joint training of law enforcement officials with judges. There has been improved knowledge and awareness and positive shifts in attitude about disability by some of the participants, and there has been progress in setting standards and indicators of access to the courts and legal processes for people with disability. First, the starting point. PUSHAM UII, the Center for Human Rights Law in Yogyakarta, is an independent entity that focuses on human rights education, freedom of religion, and disability. It does this through academic research and publications, and all of PUSHAM UII activities are based on a research-based evidence. The center implements training for a range of stakeholders, including lecturers in human rights law, police, attorneys, judges, NGO activists, students, and religious figures. It undertakes advocacy on behalf of victims of human rights violations to the courts and outside the court system. It does not act on behalf of victims within the courts. PUSHAM UII is a member of the National Consortium on Disability Komnas Difabel. The law enforcement and justice services in Indonesia on the whole are inaccessible for people with disability. Barriers exist that prevent equitable and fair access for people with physical communication, psychological and learning disabilities, and apply to the physical access features, the quality of services, and the procedures of the courts. PUSHAM UII identified that in order to improve the situation, the capacity of legal and law enforcement service providers needs to be strengthened as priority. In 2013, they approached AIPJ to support this. Second, progressing more accessible courts, services, and procedures. What took place? PUSHAM UII with the DPO SIGAP in 2013 undertook research in Solo, Yogyakarta, and Makassar. The researchers engaged with courts and law enforcement officials, prosecutors, and people with disability who had experience of the courts system. Using observation of processes and through stakeholder discussions, they investigated the obstacles people faced in accessing fair legal and justice process. Analysis of the evidence was completed about the extent and the type of barriers that people with disability experience from law enforcement agents and in the courts, both as alleged victims and perpetrators of crimes. The research highlighted that people with disability who undergo trial procedures are confronted with many barriers. These include law enforcers' inability to recognize different types of disability and understand how to appropriately accommodate each type. The lack of facilities that cause less than optimal investigation, prosecution and court examination, and non-accessible physical infrastructure such as buildings, examination rooms, and public facilities that hinders people's capacity to attend all the phases required in proceedings of law. Various norms and legal principles limit the realization of the rights of people with disability in trial procedures. In quote, when a person with disability is a victim of a crime, only 8% of the cases brought to the courts are heard. This is because the courts don't know how to communicate with the victims, particularly those with intellectual impairment or people with communication disabilities. Examples were found of police not taking evidence from alleged victims of rape who are deaf or have an intellectual impairment, which meant that the charges were not made and the case did not proceed to court. The guideline and a training resource for law enforcement officials was launched in May 2015. The resource gives advice and technical guidance about the ways to make investigation, prosecution, and examination in courts of the victim and witness more inclusive and accessible for people with disability. The resource is the basis for the training curriculum that Pusham UII has implemented with police, prosecutors, and judges in 3 locations during 2015. Copies of the resource have been shared with the course participants, law faculties at universities, and some DPOs. It will be distributed through the Judicial Commission to all courts later in 2015. It has been used as a reference with the Supreme Court in work done recently on setting access standards for its courts and legal processes. In quote, people with disability should be given equal access and provided with opportunities to develop themselves in accordance with their capacity, and all government policies must be based on measures to eliminate barriers that might hinder people with disability to attain equality. Head of Judicial Commission Suparman Marzuki. Training of law enforcement officials has taken place in Makassar, Mataram, and Yogyakarta. It has involved police, prosecutors, and judges and was co-facilitated by SIGAP with Pusham UII. This is the first time in Indonesia that the 3 participant groups have been brought together for training on disability access and inclusion. Pusham UII felt it was important that they all participated, as it is these actors that need to work cooperatively and effectively to ensure people with disability have fair and equitable access to law and justice processes. The joint training has provided a valuable forum for these actors to share perspectives, experience, and advice. In quote, for the training to be effective, it must be participatory and engage the different parties involved. Through participation, more equal discussion between participants take place, and this helps build a sense of inclusivity. Pusham UII staff. Disability access indicators were developed as part of the first training event held in Mataram. Representatives from the Judicial Commission's Sub-Regional Connecting Office worked together to develop a list of access indicators that can be used to assess and monitor court accessibility. The strategies that were used. Evidence based on research provides the basis for the guidance, resources, and training materials. Collaborative work drawing on the skills and expertise of a mainstream academic organization and DPO. Capacity development of key stakeholder groups using different methods, including providing information and through use participatory and interactive process. Collaborative training bringing together the different actors from the 3 major agencies responsible for equitable and accessible legal processes. Practical and participatory approaches used to develop standards of practice. Factors that supported the positive changes. Pusham UII had prior knowledge and interest in disability and is a member of the National Disability Network Komnas Difabel. Pusham UII is well respected and has access to influential leaders and power holders in the Supreme Court and Judicial Commission, which help to elevate interest and commitment on disability. The AIPJ Disability Technical Advisor provided advice and feedback on the resources and training materials and approach. factors that did not support the changes as had been expected or created challenges. Uncertainty about the application of the guidance resource by courts, unless supported by socialization and further training, creates the risk it will, in court, sit on a shelf rather than be applied. The need for a simplified version resource to be developed for use by DPOs. Role play and games that aim to demonstrate the experience of people with disability for the trainees sometimes are not respectful ways to present the barriers and real issues that are often faced. Third, the changes that have occurred at individual and organizational levels. Individual level. Feedback from participants following the 3-day training indicates an improvement at an individual level of awareness and understanding about disability rights and inclusion. Informal observation by the facilitators of the training of interaction and conversation between participants indicates a positive change in views expressed and of attitude towards people with disability. In quotes, almost all of the law enforcers at the training did not have any idea about disability. They considered that people with disability did not have a right to get service, but through the training process, they changed their view and understand that this perspective was incorrect. And understand now that if equality of access is made, then the legal process can work for disabled people like any other person. Pusham UII staff. It is too soon to determine whether the change in awareness and understanding at an individual level has translated to improved access and services. Organizational level. The progress made in setting access indicators for disability is very positive and important. It should mean in the future a framework for the Supreme Court to implement and monitor access features will be in place. There is work currently underway with the Supreme Court in drafting a regulation that will ensure that in all judicial institutions, the facilities and services are accessible for people with disability. The drafting of the regulation should be completed during the final months of 2015, following a national workshop to be held in August 2015. Supported by the Judicial Commission, where there will be participants and contribution made by different stakeholder groups, including DPOs. Fourth, key lessons learned based on discussions with Pusham UII. Law enforcement officials often have a very low understanding about the rights and needs of people with disability. People with disability are far less likely to access and benefit from justice than people with disability due to the physical, communication, and attitudinal barriers present in the legal and judicial systems. Practical and participatory training helps to change views of law enforcement officials relatively easily and quickly. Challenges in developing a participatory training process that are relevant and interesting for the participants while ensuring that the games played and role-playing disability does not diminish respect for the rights and genuine experience of people with disability. Participatory process that involve multiple actors help to strengthen collaboration and exchange between those who participated and should help strengthen collaboration and practice in their work. Evidence-based resources drawing on quality research strengthens the quality and relevance of the training and guidance. Setting standard and indicators provides a framework for putting in place and monitoring disability access standards. Further substantial investments of resources and training and socializing will be needed from the Supreme Court if genuine commitment and action on disability inclusion is to progress nationally given the number of courts in Indonesia.